Hey everybody, my name is Paul Eston Jr., aka Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com, and welcome to a bonus episode of a Mock Draft Monday here on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/BoyGreen25. And we are pleased to be joined by a very special guest, dare I say, elite guest here on the show. His name is Jordan Reid, and he comes to us from the mothership, the worldwide leader in sports, ESPN. That's Jordan Reid here on the program. What's up, Jordan?
What's going on, Paul? I always love your energy, and for the Jets, this is a very exciting draft, having 2 picks inside the top 10, so I'm sure you guys are sitting on pins and needles right now as we get closer to April 28th.
That's true. I'm fired up, baby. And let me start with this. Your teammate, Mel Kiper Jr., let me stop right there. Has that sunk in yet? When I say things like that, let's go over to your teammate, Mel Kiper. Let's go over to your teammate, Todd McShay. Is that settled in yet for you?
It hasn't, and every day I just want to pinch myself working alongside those two and Matt Miller, 3 guys that I grew up really want to emulate and eventually turn into. We actually shared a Zoom call for the first time, all 4 of us together, for the first time yesterday. So just being with all those guys is such a blessing. And, I'm in a great spot, and I'm just fortunate to be here.
All right, let's get to that question, though. So your teammate, Mel Kiper Jr., dropped his mock draft on Wednesday, April 13th, and he had the Jets. I want to go to the back end of the draft. He had the Jets jumping in to snag Tyler Linderbaum at the back end of round 1. And Jordan, I need to ask you, how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that move by Mel Kiper and the Jets securing their center of the future?
Well, it would be great just because early on in the process, some people were actually mocking Linderbaum inside of the top 15, and there was some chatter about the Jets even taking him at number 10 overall. I never bought into him going that high, but it seems like the sweet spot for Linderbaum is somewhere in between the mid to late first round range right now, maybe that 20 to 32 range. That's probably the sweet spot for Linderbaum right now. But, I mean, the Jets are able to get up back into the first round, the back end of the first round, and swap picks with the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that would be a home run for them and really complete that rebuild that the Jets did this offseason.
Mel Kiper did, light work with the 2-round mock draft. Jordan Reid, if I look at my notes correctly here, a 7th-round mock draft? What are you, crazy? Predicting 262 selections? Jordan, how long did that take, for Pete's sake?
Well, it took about a week, and the great thing about doing a 7-round mock is that you already have a top 300 or 400 board prospects as far as the prospects that are aligned on your board. So it's just a matter of picking and choosing based on team tendencies, where some GMs like to pick certain positions, and then just going from there. I mean, it's all fun. For me, this is my job for a living. This is what I do. So the big project that I always end with the year is that 7th-round mock draft. So I'm glad ESPN let me continue to do that, and it was a lot of fun to put together.
Jordan, you're a wild man, but let's dive a little bit in there. I want to dive over to the 2nd round. We're going to skip forward a little bit, and I noticed that you gave a little discount double check on Penn State defenders to the New York Football Jets. So let's talk about it. And those two, by the way, were Jaquan Brisker and, of course, Arnold Ebiketie. We'll start with Brisker first. How does he complement Jordan Whitehead, who the Jets added in free agency?
Well, I think they have 2 skill sets that really complement each other really well. And with Brisker, he's more of your strong safety type, but also has some tendencies to play free safety. But you don't want him living and dying on what I like to call the roof of the defense, just because he's so good at run support. He's very consistent as a run tackler, as a run supporter, I should say. But you can't take into account some of his missed tackles from last year just because he was battling a messed up shoulder. So there was some hesitancy with that as far as going into tackles. But prior to that, I thought he was a sure tackler as any safety in this entire draft. So the Joe Douglas hasn't even spent draft capital on the defensive side prior to the 3rd round. So this will be a new norm for him. Ashton Davis was a 3rd-round selection a few years ago, but I just think they can get an upgrade at that spot. I think they get a more rangier player on the back end. So getting Brisker along with Whitehead, who is more of a free safety type that you want, roaming sideline to sideline on the roof of the defense, I think they have Brisker and Whitehead complement each other really well, their skill set.
And by the way, Jordan, when you dropped that it may have been even months ago, when you dropped that nugget in there, the highest defender Joe Douglas has ever drafted was Ashton Davis. I almost spit out my drink and went, oh my God, Jordan's right. Good Lord. He's got to help a brother out down there with Robert Saleh. And he certainly does. And you do in this draft. Let's go over to Ebiketie. What's his ceiling in the NFL? How does he project? He was the other guy you mocked to the Jets in the 2nd round.
Yeah, I like Ebiketie a lot. It wouldn't surprise me if he sneaks into the back end of the 1st round. I think Mel had him going in the back end of the 1st round in his latest mock draft. So he's a big fan of Ebiketie. I'm a big fan of him too. I think he's a little bit raw as far as a run defender. He still needs to gain some weight in his lower half. But as far as a pass rusher, he has everything that you want in the position. He has the arm length. He has the pass rush repertoire and the acumen walking through the door. Now it's just a matter of him putting it together consistently. You can use him as a stand-up rusher. You can put his hand in the dirt, and you can even drop him in coverage too. Everything that Robert Saleh asked of his weak side defensive end, I think Ebiketie can satisfy all of those needs that he requires of those defensive ends on the weak side.
And Jordan, let's talk about the strategy you chose to employ in this draft, the old double dip at the edge rusher position, giving us Kayvon Thibodeaux. Thank you, Jordan. Beautiful. I love Kayvon Thibodeaux, I just have to say. And with Ebiketie, I ask you, how important is that philosophy, that strategy in this draft, which, again, your teammate, Todd McShay, said this may be the best edge class in a decade. How important is it to potentially double dip here if you're the Jets?
Well, it's huge, especially when you consider the division that the Jets are in right now. A lot of teams have young quarterbacks and then also explosive perimeter weapons too. So the best way to slow down some of these explosive offenses is to just get pressure off of the edge. And if you think about the Jets, they have not had a premier edge rusher in a very long time, probably since John Abraham, from what I remember. And the last double-digit sack artist for the Jets was Muhammad Wilkerson back in 2015. I believe it was, when he had 12 sacks. So it's been a long time since this team has had a premier edge rusher or somebody that you circle on the scouting report that you're worried about going into that week when game planning for the Jets defense.
Too blunt and too true, Jordan. It's too damn true. Your stats are right. Your information and research were absolutely correct. And everybody, make sure you stop what you're doing. Hit the thumbs up on this video. Show some support. Hit the subscribe button. And also follow Jordan Reid on Twitter if you're not already, for Pete's sake. Obviously, you should be, because he's terrific and fantastic. And plus, you can see him on the television there on ESPN. He's been doing great work in this full first NFL draft season there at the mothership. Let's keep looking in your mock draft. There's a lot of interesting nuggets in here. In the third round, you had them adding some offensive tackle insurance, which seems to be a polarizing topic among Jet fans with George Fan. He's a pending free agent after next year. Mekhi Becton, uncertainty. And you have them taking Sean Ryan out of UCLA. Is he a guy that could compete immediately, or is he more so kind of a dart throw for the future at the position?
I think the way I saw it, Paul, was honestly, I think they just need some insurance in case Becton injury struggles continue or some of the things that's going on with him. And then also with George Fant, I know the team really likes him at right tackle, but I just think having Sean Ryan as that swing tackle, also a guy that can kick inside if something happens suddenly with Elijah Vera Tucker or Laken Tomlinson, even though neither one of those guys have missed games. I know Vera Tucker's still young, but Laken Tomlinson hasn't missed any games over the past 3 or 4 seasons since he's entered the league. But I just like to have that backup swing tackle in case you need somebody to go in right away. And I think with Sean Ryan, I think he's ready-made to step in at guard or tackle, even though he played really well at offensive tackle at UCLA. Go and watch him against Kayvon Thibodeaux. I think he played lights out in that game against him. So I think he's that ready-made swing tackle that could play on the right or the left side, or he also can kick inside too. So I kind of saw it more so as a security blanket that they can use as that third offensive tackle.
And by the way, they can use it because the break the glass right now is Connor McDermott and Chuma Edoga, who I loved a couple years ago coming out of the draft. But boy, you need a little bit more insurance for old Zach Wilson there in terms of that protection. Let's go to the 5th round. You had the Jets adding Zamir White, the running back out of Georgia, and you listed him as your favorite prospect team fit in round 5. And give us the details here, Jordan, because obviously I think Michael Carter needs a yin to his yang, a salt to his pepper in that backfield. Why do you believe Zamir would be that guy?
So obviously we saw at Georgia how efficient he was when he shared the workload with more of a versatile type of back. He shared the workload with James Cook, a player who I like a lot too in this draft class. And the Jets already have Michael Carter in the building, and we saw how well he performed as a rookie, as that versatile guy. You can split him out wide. You can use him in the backfield too, and he can be a stable part of your passing game. But they don't have that in-between tackles banger that they can use on short yardage, or if they just need a yard or 2 here and there. And I think Zamir White definitely can be that guy. He tested much better than what I thought he would. So they need that, not bell cow guy, but they need that guy that can do some of the grunt work, I like to say, and just get those tough, hard-nosed yards. And I think he complements really well to more so of a versatile skill set type of player on Michael Carter.
I agree with you, Jordan. Stylistically, I think that makes sense. Something interesting this week, just because it happened to come up, the Jets have, quote-unquote, shown a ton of interest in James Cook. While they haven't used an official top 30 visit on him, what they did do is they have been showing a lot of interest, according to the Pro Football Network. Now, normally, I agree with you. We're on the same page. I think stylistically, you want different guys who could do different things. Is there an argument to be had to have guys that could just do a lot of things? So James Cook, to your example, a versatile guy that could catch the ball out of the backfield, and that's something Michael Carter can do too. Would that be a weird or wrong philosophy if the Jets decide to go in that direction?
No, not at all. I mean, if you have the great thing about running backs is the more you can do, the better. And there's
Sure.
no such thing as you need this type or you need this type. I just like to have complementary skill sets just because when you have a whole bunch of guys that do the same thing, now you're starting to interchange them and you have to worry about who you're going to put in on certain plays and they may not satisfy a certain skill set. So I think with Zamir White and then also with Michael Carter, you're not going to have a jostling of something somebody can't do or something somebody can do in a sense. You have Michael Carter, who's more your versatile guy, and then you have your in between the tackles type of banger and Zamir White, those guys that can take 20, 25 plus carries a game if you need them to. Not saying White is going to be able to do that, but if you need a tough, hard-nosed runner, I think Zamir White fits more the mold of that.
Jordan, let's go to this. So let's put on this cap if you can. Are there any prospects in this class that are just puzzle piece fits for the Jets? Regardless around, you just seen you're like, wow, that'd be a great fit with the Jets, either schematically speaking, personality with what the Jets are looking for. Have there been any of those players that have stood out to you in this process that could be those puzzle piece fits for the Jets?
Well, in the first round, I think Sauce Gardner would be a really good fit. And I know Joe Douglas has shown a tendency to kind of wait on drafting defensive backs really on day 2 or day 3. But if they take him at 4 or 10, I mean, I would have no issues with that, honestly, just because I think in Robert Sala's defense, a fine mixture of cover 3 and then also with some man-to-man principles, something that Sauce Gardner has really specialized in Cincinnati. And if you think about it, all the great Jets defenses, they've had that alpha corner at the top of the depth chart. And I think Ahmad Sauce Gardner can definitely be that on the next level. He has the charisma. He has the attitude that you want walking through the door. We saw the tweets of him saying, I'm the best player in the draft. And that's the type of confidence that you want at that position. So I like Sauce Gardner a lot to the Jets. Not saying he's gonna be there for them or they're going to select him, but I just like his fit and Robert Sala's defense if we're talking about a player and team fit that I like a lot.
Yeah, he really does have a nice moxie, which is infectious, and it makes me even love him even more than besides the stats and the analytics show. Is there anyone after round 1 that could tickle the fancy? Obviously, the Jets are in a pretty good spot, 4 picks inside the top 38 there.
I mean, I like Brisker. I talked about Brisker a lot.
Right.
I think Brisker would be a really good fit too. So he's one that definitely screams New York Jets to me. He has that calm, laid-back demeanor, but he just flips a switch when he's on the field. He has the physical temperament that you love to see on the back end too. So Brisker, I think would be a really good fit.
Now, let me just ask you kind of a general question. This doesn't have to necessarily be Jets related, but is there a player that people are talking a lot about, but he's going to go lower than the consensus believes he will?
Ooh, that's a really good question. It's just tough to project in this draft class
Right.
because everybody goes quiet, that I like to say. A lot of the sources that you talk to, your scouting buddies that work for teams, nobody's trying to show their hand. It's like that game of poker of everybody's trying to keep everything close to the vest right now. So that's kind of tough to say right now. I don't have like any one player that I think is going to go lower than a lot of people expect just because there's 32 different draft boards across the league. Some people may have some guy high while another team may have somebody low. So one player that has, and this isn't just related, but one team that has, or one player that has mixed reviews is Charles Cross from Mississippi State. And I think that's just because of the stylistically, the type of offensive tackle he is. He's not going to be for everybody. There was an 81 to 19% pass run ratio in that offense with Mike Leach. So he's really polished as a pass protector, but he has some work to do as far as a run blocker. He just doesn't have a lot of experience doing it, which I mean, it's not going to work for every team just because you have some teams that like to run the football. So like Pittsburgh, Baltimore, some other Seattle, he's not going to be fits in those types of schemes, but more of your wide open schemes like the Saints. And then some other teams that like to throw the ball around the yard a little bit more, they're going to like him more. So Charles Cross is definitely one name that's kind of had mixed reviews right now. That's not to say he still won't be a top 15 pick, but just based on the feedback that I've gotten talking to some friends within the industry, he's just one name that's kind of been high or low on some boards.
Jordan, how do you incorporate that into your job? That is fascinating to me because, right, you're talking to a lot of teams, a lot of sources, and some stuff you have to take for real. You're like, I'm hearing this, I believe it for your mock drafts as you're giving them to the fans. But some stuff you got to be like, that's just malarkey. They're just feeding me that. You got to have like a BS meter almost with the stuff that you're hearing. How do you filter all that stuff in and out as you've been going through this process at ESPN?
Well, that's kind of when you just have to stick to your board and trust what your eyes see. And the tough part that is a gift and a curse with the media is that you're not drafting for a team or a certain scheme. So
Right.
you're building your board based on talent, on what you see on tape. And like for teams, there may be some guy that plays in a cover three scheme, and I play mostly man. So that cornerback isn't going to be high on my board, even though he may be high across the media or for some other team. So that's the tough part about doing this from a media perspective. You're not drafting for a certain scheme or a certain positional fit or even a team. So I think that's the tough part from a media standpoint.
I loved your tweet this week, by the way, and it was one question I already had on my docket before because we set up this interview ahead of time. And you put out the Jordan Reid guys, and you mentioned the star that NFL people put on their boards as they're like, oh, this is one of our guys. Again, feel free to pick any from that list that you'd like, but who are the people that you'd be willing to slam the table for? You'd be willing to argue, debate, and throw hands, quite frankly, if it goes that far, for this or that prospect in this 2022 class.
Yeah, so I'll just stay with one that the Jets need as far as a position,
Sure.
and one is Jalen Petrie from Baylor. I like him a lot, even though he's a little bit undersized at the position. He's about 5'11", right around 195 to 200 pounds. The thing about Petrie is he had 18 and a half tackles for loss, which is an unheard of number at
Yeah.
that position. Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, but he progressively got better every single year, and he battled a lot of adversity walking through the door. He actually was in Matt Rule's first recruiting class where they went 1-11. I believe it was their first year. Last year, they end up with a top 10 ranking. They're one of the best defenses in the country, and he played that acclaimed star position that Minka Fitzpatrick made very known, and Nick Saban's defense that carried over to Dave Aranda's defense. And you have to be versatile in that scheme and in that position. And I just think he's so versatile. And then just seeing him at the Senior Bowl, the big question that I had for him was just how well he could hold up in coverage. But in one-on-one sessions and then in team, I thought he's phenomenal in pass coverage. So that's why I think the Senior Bowl is such a valuable tool. And then also you get a lot of questions answered seeing these guys in person with your own eyes. So seeing Petrie with my own eyes, hearing him talk about football, saying that he builds his entire game basically trying to emulate Tyrann Mathieu, which I love. I see a lot of Tyrann Mathieu in his game from a run defense perspective and then also in pass coverage. And then whenever a person has so much, or whenever a player has so much on their plate, versatility just screams smarts to me, just because the more hats that you can wear at that position, the better. And you have to be very smart when you're talking about a versatile chess piece on the back end. So Jalen Petrie, I mean, I would take him if I'm the Chiefs in the back end of the first round, I would take him at 29 or 30. Or if I'm the Jets at the top half of the second round, I would take him too, especially having a need at that safety spot.
Let me ask you about the Senior Bowl. That's interesting. The Jets, for the first time since 1979, were there at the Senior Bowl coaching. How big of an advantage is it specifically for those two teams? There's the Jets and Lions, who not only got all the on-field work and the practice, but they got the behind-the-scenes stuff. How much of a direct correlation is that from the knowledge they gained to saying, hey, we may want to draft this guy because we had extra intel that maybe some other teams didn't?
Well, it's huge just because with the draft, it's basically just trying to put a whole bunch of puzzle pieces together to culminate and finish a final pre-draft scouting portfolio or resume, in a sense that I like to say. So what happens a lot of times with evaluators and then also scouts, their first time really getting to meet these guys in person is at the combine. And I like to compare it to speed dating. You only get 15 to 20 minutes with these guys, and there's only so many questions that you can get. You also have to get in some film clips with that if you want to. So just imagine trying to fit all of that in, trying to learn the person, trying to get some of these clips up with them. There's just not a lot of time. But with the Senior Bowl, you can spend as much time as you want with these guys. There's no time limit. And of course, I'm sure they have different time parameters that you can spend with them, but you get to see them in the film room. You get to see how good they get throughout the week with their first exposure to NFL coaching, but also you get to see who is more so your laid back guys, your team captains, your alphas. And I think that's so big in the pre-draft process. So just seeing their first exposure to NFL coaching, and then the most important piece, you get to see them move in person. And just seeing a player in person is just so much different than seeing something, what I like to say, online. It's kind of like buying a car. When you see a car online, it may look good from the outside and then the inside, but once you see it in person, you get to test it, you get to drive it around, you get to see just how the engine looks, just little stuff like that. I think it really helps.
Jordan, I got to say that I thought nothing would beat the analogy you said a couple years ago. You were working for the Draft Network at the time, and you talked about the difference between scouting the helmet versus the player. And you were talking about the Ohio State quarterbacks at the time, but that Carr one, that may have beaten it. So you're just fantastic, Jordan, with your way to articulate. I think that the relatability and the articulation is a real reason why fans just gravitate towards you. And I think that's an infectious quality that obviously ESPN saw. So pay raise from a man, Jordan Reid, if we may. Normally on these interview series, Jordan, we wrap up with forcing the guest to do a mock draft. But Jordan, you need a little R&R, okay? You just did a 7-round mock draft for Pete's sake. So I'm going to change the question to this. Is there any bold or unpopular Jets takes you have? Because, when you drop those mock drafts out there, people get a little nasty. They're in the mentions there beneath everything they're throwing at you from 32 fan bases all attacking you at once. But there are any bold Jet takes that you have on their potential draft? I've seen some of them on Kyle Hamilton. That was a little crazy out there on some of that talk or things of that nature. Is there any bold Jet takes you want to get out there as we're just a couple weeks out from the draft?
I'm not saying this is going to happen, but since we're being bold, I'll go with the Jets take Jameson Williams at number 10 overall, and he's the first wide receiver off of the board. And Garrett Wilson has been a common peg as far as placing him at number 10 overall, but I'm going to go with Jameson Williams at number 10 overall to the New York Jets.
Sexy. I like it. Jordan, as we're signing off and letting you go, I'm going to say this to your face. I've texted you behind the scenes. Jordan, what you did for me, and people can see it, it's pinned to the top of my Twitter. You helped the brother out when I announced that my fiance was pregnant. We did a cool fake Jets press conference with Jordan Reid, Benjamin Albright, Brandon Gott, and so many wonderful people in this business that all contributed to make it special. Jordan, I've told you this behind the scenes, but you deserve the public love for it as well. One of the coolest things ever. We've gotten so many reactions from that and how cool that was. Thank you so much that's life-changing for me, and I'll never forget that.
No problem. It's such a blessing, especially when you're talking about welcome a child into the world. So, peace and love to your family, and anything that I can do to help, as always, just let me know.
Jordan, one of the best in the gosh darn business. I'm glad ESPN has you. I hope to have you locked into a 200-year contract because you're a hot commodity, my friend. You're fantastic. Thanks for taking the time, brother. Always appreciate it.